Back on record at 9:25 a.m. Please continue.
Okay, so you mentioned you had an operational role early on. Was that as an employee of LuLaRoe?
Yeah.
Was there a title associated with that?
I would say Chief Operating Officer, but like I say, it really wasn't a functional role and responsibility. It was for a few months as we were starting to work through some warehouse expansion and changes, and we quickly hired somebody to take that responsibility right away. That was Mr. John West.
Okay. When you were in that role, who did you report to?
Mark.
Okay. Mark Stidham.
Yeah, Mark and Deanne, both.
And then after you moved out of that role and were sort of those performance responsibilities that you were describing, who did you report to?
I've always reported directly to Mark and
Okay.
Deanne.
When you were in that performance role that you were describing, did anyone report to you?
No.
What about as Chief Communications Officer? I think you said the communications team reported to you?
Yeah. Yep. Have a small team. It's ranged anywhere from 2 to 4 people at any given time.
What about now as Chief Strategy Officer? Does anyone report to you?
No.
You said that you've done work for LuLaRoe through Snake River Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
When did you do work for LuLaRoe through Snake River?
I don't recall the date specifics, but it would have been, it was during a time when LuLaRoe was asking for specific, I would say more contract work, more allocated time on their behalf, and so at that time Mr. Transtrom and I went under separate contract with the company, and that would have been the time. Like I said, I don't recall the date on that when that started.
So I just want to make sure it's clear. So you, and we're going to get into Service Quest in a minute, but you
Sure.
started working for LuLaRoe through Service Quest, correct?
Yeah, it was a subcontract to Service Quest, and we were contracted as a consultant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then at some point that arrangement changed such that your work for LuLaRoe was contracted through your own consulting company,
Yes.
Snake River.
Yeah.
Okay. And then eventually you became an employee of LuLaRoe.
Correct.
Okay.
Again, you got to give it just a beat because you're starting to cut off her
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
Once you became an employee of LuLaRoe,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever do work for LuLaRoe through Snake River Consulting after that?
I've done a little bit of work on some contract renegotiation, and that was a spec piece of work from, I can't remember if it was LLR or LuLaRoe.
What type of contract?
It was contracts that they had on some of their projects in Wyoming.
What kind of projects are those?
Training projects. They had some interest in a horse. I'm trying to remember. It would be an arena and some cabins, and they no longer wanted to engage in that, and so there was some unwinding to do with other partners that they had.
When you said training projects, are you referring to horse training or?
Experiential retreat type stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about your work as a contractor through Service Quest.
Okay.
What is Service Quest?
Service Quest, to my knowledge, is a consultancy firm that provides services primarily in the direct selling network marketing space.
And I think you said you weren't sure how many other clients other than LuLaRoe you worked with while at Service Quest, but it was more than 50?
That's a guess,
Okay.
yeah.
Were those all primarily direct selling companies?
Yes.
Okay. Were any of them multi-level marketing companies?
How would you define multi-level marketing?
What's your understanding of the term multi-level marketing?
My understanding of multi-level marketing companies is primarily tied to a compensation plan and a direct-to-consumer model that incorporates leadership and leadership and sales development of a sales force through that plan.
Through that compensation plan?
The compensation plan would be part of the company's structure, but not necessarily tied to how they manage.
And under that definition, were some of the clients you worked with while working with Service Quest multi-level marketing companies?
I would just caution you, if you have NDAs with any of those companies, just have in mind whether or not you need to have confidentiality provision or anything here.
And I'm not asking you any names at this point. I'm
Yeah,
just asking generally.
I'll answer in general. I wouldn't be able to specify whether they were a multi-level marketing company or not, because I didn't do much work when it came to compensation plan in review or consulting or any of that space. So most of my work was done on product offering and how they might go to market.
And you said most of your clients through Service Quest were direct selling companies. How would you define direct selling?
I would define direct selling as a person-to-person exchange of product and purchase. So rather than going through a third party, that it would just be a direct relationship between seller and buyer.
Did you ever provide legal services when working with Service Quest?
No.
You're not a lawyer, correct?
No.
Okay. During your time at Service Quest, were you based in Idaho Falls?
Yes.
When did you first start working with LuLaRoe through Service Quest?
I believe it was in the fall of 2013, if I recall.
Looking back at your LinkedIn profile, it looks like you were with Service Quest starting right around September 2013. So was that the beginning of your work with Service Quest was also around the time you first started working with LuLaRoe?
No, I had done work with Service Quest before that. Very informal. In fact, Terrell, Mr. Transtrom, was a client of mine. I actually collaborated with another co-consultant to do some executive coaching and personal coaching, and that's where Mr. Transtrom and I first met each other. And that would have been probably 3 years prior to that date that you mentioned in 2013.
Okay. So in about fall of 2013, you started working with Service Quest, around the fall of 2013, you started working with LuLaRoe as an independent contractor with Service Quest.
Correct.
Okay.
And it would have been one of of a group of other clients that were being worked with as well.
Okay. And at the start, you said you were billing as an independent contractor through Service Quest?
Yes.
Okay. So were you paid by Service Quest or by LuLaRoe directly during that period?
Could you restate the question? I want to make sure.
And I want to focus on the time you were contracting through Service Quest before you started contracting through Snake River Consulting.
Okay.
During that period, were you paid by Service Quest directly or were you paid by LuLaRoe?
Service Quest.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Were you paid on an hourly basis or a flat fee basis? And again, I'm talking just about your work for LuLaRoe.
Yeah, it would have been a flat fee, and it would have been a percentage of the total fee.
Percentage of the total fee that Service Quest was collecting?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall how much that flat fee was?
I don't.
And again, focusing just on this time when you were contracting through Service Quest, were you ever paid directly by LuLaRoe?
No, not
Okay.
that I'm aware of.
And then you said at some point the billing arrangement changed such that you were contracting through Snake River Consulting. Do you recall when that was?
I don't. I don't recall that date.
Do you recall about how long after you started working with LuLaRoe that arrangement shifted?
It seems like it was maybe a year and a half into the work that we were helping with.
Around that time, did your relationship with Service Quest end?
Yeah, that would have been, I think so, yeah.
So looking back at your LinkedIn profile, it looks like you have July 2014 as the end date for your time with Service Quest. Would it have been around that time that you started contracting with LuLaRoe through Snake River Consulting?
It could have been. I don't recall.
Okay. When you started contracting through Snake River Consulting, were you billing LuLaRoe directly then?
Yes.
Okay. Were you billing on a hourly basis?
No, it would have been a contract retainer. Monthly retainer.
Monthly retainer, so a flat fee
Yeah.
per month?
Yep.
Do you recall how much that was?
I don't.
And how long did you work with LuLaRoe through Snake River Consulting?
It would have been through May, June of 2016, right around in there.
And it's May or June of 2016 when you became a LuLaRoe employee?
Yes.
Okay. At some point you moved from Idaho Falls to Southern California, correct? When
Yeah.
was that?
That was at that same time.
At that same time in May or June of 2016?
Yeah, and I gotta caution you, the reporter's having a little difficult time. You gotta give a beat
Okay.
between the question and your answer. I know it's unnatural, but if you could just keep it in mind.
I want to go back to the work that Service Quest was doing for LuLaRoe. Who else was doing work through Service Quest for LuLaRoe?
For LuLaRoe?
Mm-hmm.
Boy. I don't recall is there a specific time frame that you're
Well, I just wanted
referring
to
to?
sort of get a list of who you recall doing work through Service Quest for LuLaRoe. I think you've mentioned
don't-
Terrell Transtrom.
Yeah, the only person that comes to mind that maybe was tied to Service Quest that did work for LuLaRoe, he had a son-in-law named JT, and I believe that JT was actually hired as an employee at one point to help in the customer service department. I know that Terrell's brother does work for the company at present. I don't know if he was ever contracted through Service Quest or any of that. That would not have been when I was with Service Quest. So.
And just to make sure we're clear, Terrell's brother is Tim Transtrom?
Yes.
Okay. And you said Terrell's son-in-law, I think you said, That's John Taylor Eskelson?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And you said he, at some point, was an employee. Do you mean that he was an employee of LuLaRoe?
Yeah, he was employed by LuLaRoe. He was an employee of Service Quest, I believe, at one point as well. And I don't know if that relationship or that the nature of his work with Service Quest changed when he became an employee of LuLaRoe or not.
Okay. Now, eventually, it sounded like in May or June of 2016, you became an employee of LuLaRoe, correct?
Yes.
Whose idea was that?
I guess you'd say it was my idea. Not my idea to hire me, but it was my idea to commit to that. I had been asked by Mark and Deanne if I would be willing to take an executive role with their company and move my family, take a permanent position with their company. And so it was something that I was resistant to at first, and then as time went on and as commitment to be a resource for them, it made sense to not leave my family every single week and on different projects and be away from them with the scope of the practice that I had. So we shut down a lot of client work, and I relocated my family to Southern California. Moved my family. I had a daughter that was getting ready to go into her senior year and a couple of other children, and so they all were ready for an adventure, and we packed up and rented out the house and moved to California.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like they were asking you to take on that role and become an employee for a while. About how long before you decided that the time was right to make that move?
I think it was probably about a 6-month window. They wanted more work, more engagement, more on-site, and I think they were kind of at a crossroads where they felt like I don't know that we can continue in that type of a relationship. We really would like you to be an employee. So
It sounds like you were doing a lot, although you were based in Idaho Falls, you were doing a lot of travel to California.
Travel to California, travel to other client locations across the country. A lot of travel, though, yes.
Did Mark and Deanne tell you why they wanted you to take on that executive role and become an employee?
I don't remember the exact details of their conversation during that time, other than they felt like I added value and that they could, that they wanted me to be a bigger part of their company. And that's about the context I remember from that.
You were describing earlier sort of your first role directly with LuLaRoe being an operational role. I think you said if you had a title, it would have been Chief Operations Officer. Was that right when you moved to California and became an employee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be a good statement.
So you mentioned that part of the move to California and becoming an employee of LuLaRoe is becoming a part of the executive team.
That wasn't part of the equation. I think it was they wanted me to come and help at that level, but nothing was defined at that point.
Okay. Are you currently a member of the executive team?
Yes.
Okay. When were you first a member of the executive team?
I would say that the executive team has evolved through time. I think it was an assembly of functional responsibility and management for specific entities within the organization. I don't know that, as the company grew, it became more formal as more outside hires started to take place. When we brought in a chief technology officer, when we brought in somebody that was overseeing logistics and warehouse. As the organization grew and started to materialize into more functional entities, I think that was more of the evolution of the executive or leadership team. And so, again, I don't recall when that specific timeline was. We've always met as a company. We've always met as functional entities as much as we can. And so, like I say, it's evolved, and it's definitely, I would say, over the last at least 2 to 3 years has been a direct, here's the executive team, these are the individuals that are working each day and managing teams and directing the company.
So formalized in the last 2 or 3 years, but a little bit more amorphous before that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about who's on the executive team right now.
Okay.
Can you name who is on the team?
As far as executives, John West, who is the over warehouse and logistics. Guillermo Lopez, who's the chief technology officer. Lauren Simpson, who is presently serving as chief marketing and sales officer. Noel Knighton, who is the chief financial officer. Myself. Let me think of who else. We have a number of family members that are there in a respective capacity for management responsibilities. So you have Austin Stidham, who represents the compliance and data analytics and compensation teams. You have Kenny Brady, who is the vice president of sales. You have Justin Lyon, who is has been the chief marketing officer. Let's see, Jordan Brady, who's had a number of different roles and responsibilities, but is there under request of Mark and Deanne as he works closely with the marketing and sales teams. Also part of the travel group that would be doing training and outreach to the field. We have Tanya Lamas, who represents the communication team as VP of Comms. You have Mark Stidham and Deanne Stidham in their respective roles as co-founders, with Deanne as president and Mark as CEO. Let me think of who else might be in that group. We have our legal team, Bob and Bill, Bob Lull and Bill Florados, that would be in attendance at our executive meetings, not part of the executive team, but there as general counsel. I think if there's anybody I'm missing. I think that's it.
Is Jeff Thompson on the executive team, or has he ever been?
I don't, that would have been during a time when we didn't have necessarily a formal executive team. He's not an employee of the company. Mm-hmm. He would have served in the capacity of, I think he was kind of like a VP of comms or sorry, of not comms, VP of Finance. He would have been one of the early employees that helped manage the day-to-day finances of the company.
What about Michael Brady?
Oh, yes, Michael Brady. Sorry, thank you. Yes, Michael Brady's there representing, he's over production and design. Thank you, I can't believe I forgot Michael. Yes, Michael's there as well, part of that executive team.
And when you were giving that list, you mentioned there's various family members included in that list. Are you referring to family of Mark and Deanne?
Yes.
Okay. Are you related to the family at all?
I'm
Okay.
not.
I just wanted to clarify. And of everyone in that list that you said is currently on the executive team, have they been part of the executive team in the roles that you described for that last 2 or 3 years since that team has formalized?
Yes.
Who are the key decision makers with LuLaRoe?
Objection form.
The final decision's always made with Mark and Deanne.
Do the executives have decision-making authority over the areas that they oversee to some extent?
Objection form.
Are there specific decisions that you're referring to, or in general?
And just things?
Yes.
How often?
We meet every Monday morning, unless there's something that comes up that would change that agenda, but we try to meet each week, and then they'll have ad hoc meetings if they need to schedule something to focus on a specific project, but I would say weekly would be the go-to.
Is there a particular person who's responsible for organizing the meetings?
I've been asked to take notes and organize the agenda, but again, the call of the meeting, scope of the meeting is always under the direction and presiding authority of Mark and Deanne.
When you take notes, how do you take them?
I take them on my computer in a Google Doc, and I'll share that document with the executive team for notes and assignments.
How do you share it?
Just through the sharing capabilities within the document itself.
So the Google Doc sharing capabilities?
Yep.
Do you keep the agenda in a Google document as well?
Yes.
Okay. And do you share it with the executive team in the same manner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are the agendas and notes sort of in a running document, or do you create a separate document for each meeting?
We've been creating a separate document for some time now. I don't recall when that started, but that was part of getting organized and making sure that we have visibility of assignments and responsibilities.
Have you always been the person responsible for notes and agenda over the time that the executive team has been formalized in the last 2 or 3 years?
Not always.
Who else has been responsible for that?
I don't know. I think there were times when notes were taken, times where notes weren't taken. Meetings were called, ad hoc meetings, verbal meetings. That I think there was a lot of variability on that, so I couldn't give a specific structure that would have started and stopped at a certain time.
In the period before the executive team was more formalized, were there meetings with sort of similar people in the roles? Sometimes those specific people may have changed, but the roles that you described, were there meetings among those people that were like executive meetings, even though it was before it was formalized?
Yes.
Okay. Were those regular meetings?
I think the intention's always been to meet each week. I think even periods of time there were probably daily meetings, but there's always been an intention to gather the team each week.
Were there notes or agendas back before it was formalized?
Objection asked and answered.
I don't recall.
Who at LuLaRoe is responsible for formulating policies and procedures for the independent fashion retailers?
Ultimately, Mark and Deanne, as it's their company. I don't spend a lot of time in the policy side of things. That would be Austin Stidham. And certainly work that he would do with the legal team. There are outside advisors for policy as well, outside legal teams that have been consulted on that. But that's not a primary function of mine.
Are there outside advisors other than the legal team for the policy?
Objection form.
Outside legal advisory, but not anything outside of that. Yeah.
I think I just misunderstood you. And is it that same group, Mark, Deanne, Austin Stidham, the legal team, responsible for compliance with those policies and procedures?
Yeah, primarily Austin and his team. And I would ask for a question of clarification on this. Are you referring to employee policies and procedures, or policies and procedures with the independent sales force?
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for asking. I'm focused on the compliance with policies and procedures for IFRs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those answers are representative of that.
Okay. Who LuLaRoe is responsible for setting its return policy,
Objection.
return of products?
Objection form.
I would defer to the same answer I've provided before, that decisions like that would originate and close with Mark and Deanne.
Okay, I think it's probably a good time for a quick break.
Okay.
Hold the record at 10:06 a.m.